The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to WordStream's October webinar, Don't Be Spooked, 6 Tricks and Treats to Crush Google and Facebook Ad Automation. My name is Maggie, and I'm here to kick things off before passing it off to our expert, Nava. I also want to remind everyone that if you didn't have a chance to run our free Google Ads Grader before this session, click the link in the chat box to get a full audit of your Google Ads account completely free, and it only takes 60 seconds. Before you get started, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about WordStream. You might know us from all of our free tools, our awesome content, or our amazing blog. We are premier partners of Google, Bing, and Facebook, and we offer a software here at WordStream called WordStream Advisor, which helps businesses succeed in the landscape of online advertising all in one place. WordStream Advisor makes online advertising with Google, Bing, and Facebook super simple. It helps to increase your ROI, gives you custom reports, and provides you with tons of features to save you time by simplifying your online advertising efforts. If you want to know more about how we can help you, definitely head to our website. As you get familiar with WordStream, connect with us. Find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can learn, interact with WordStream customers, and see awesome content. One last logistics slides before I pass this off. This webinar is being recorded, and you will be emailed the recording along with the slides within 48 hours after we end today's session. Also, please submit your questions throughout the webinar. We want this to be as beneficial as possible, so submit any questions that you have, and we will do our best to get to as many as we can at the end. Without further ado, I will pass things off to our presenter, Nava.
Hey everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this session about kind of conquering our fears and working with automation. As was mentioned, my name is Nava Hopkins. I'm the Services Innovation Strategist here at WordStream, which basically means I get the pleasure of working across our entire international advertiser and agency base, as well as speaking on the conference circuit. I was recently named a top 25 PPC influencer. I've been in the space since 2008, and I am an avid Star Wars fan, gamer, geek, and pet mom. Actually, I have a puppy you can follow on Instagram called HK47, hashtag PPC puppy. And so the session that we're going to talk about today and the things we're going to dive into really come from the lessons learned, not only in managing accounts, not only in hearing from my fellow experts on kind of what they're seeing, but pain points of businesses like you. How do we retain our relevance? How do we make sure that we're delegating when appropriate, but also retaining the tasks that we truly can't trust to machines yet? So we're going to go through 3 core sections: addressing the angst, the core tasks that humans complete, and working together with machines. So one of the things that kind of starts this conversation is how many of us enjoy actually doing grunt work. When I say grunt work, I mean things like running reports, micromanaging bids, things like that. And what I found really fascinating is that SEMrush did a study a little while back that found that the most valued skill for a PPC marketer was Excel. And I found that really depressing because by the nature of what we do as marketers, hearing the intent on helping brands profit off of intent is a strategic skill. But actually in the US, Excel beat out AdWords, analytics, Facebook, PPC, Bing, even SEM lost out to Excel. And so what I also found really interesting is that if you look at how we pay people, we pay our strategists double on average what we pay our executors. And the reason for that is simple. The human mind is great for having ideas, not for holding on to them. Our minds are too valuable to waste on grunt work. And if you had to staff for all the grunt work, you would go out of business. There is no possible way, whether you're a brand, an agency, that you could do all of this yourself. Because if you had to do it all yourself, you couldn't execute at scale. So when we look at machine learning and AI, what we're really looking at are the means to unlock greater potential in ourselves. So the things that I find cause the greatest amount of angst via machine learning are creative, close variance, and bidding. And so let's dive into this a little bit deeper. So when we think about creative and the machine learning creative, the automated creative, a good hunk of it is focused on running our tests. So when you think about responsive search ads, responsive display ads, it's really about message matchmaking. It's not necessarily about creating content in and of yourself. When I asked my industry colleagues kind of what are people's take on responsive search ads, responsive display ads, most aren't committing to them yet. Yet the data that we found is that, and this is based off of Google data, folks that use smart creative see a three times better conversion rates than those that don't. And that makes a ton of sense because you have a tool to help jumpstart your ad group to get those valuable conversions in, to get those valuable engagements in. Now with close variants, we are control freaks by nature. We love to, and at least I am. And when it comes to close variants, this is potentially a really risky area if you do not trust the machines. And when you see that you're beginning to match to that much more via exact, that much more via implied terms, it can be really scary. But what we found is that folks that leverage close variants actually have better click-through rate and cheaper cost per clicks. Because by the nature of how variants work, it's not matching you to a thing because Google or Bing are evil. It's matching you because there's the potential for net new queries. 15% of all queries completed are unique. There's no possible way you could account for them all. And with implied words, there's also potential discounts. So in the old rules of engagement, moving and rigging, mover and rigging, or rigger or rig would be considered net or net new ideas. Yet in today's world of implied matching, you could actually leverage just rigging and you would capture all of that traffic. So when we're thinking about close variants, it's not just the opportunity to get net new queries, it's also the opportunity to invest in specifically the ideas that represent cheaper costs and greater conversions. Now, the one area where I find the most resistance to automation and to machine learning is really in the automated bidding. Now, full disclosure, this is a Google data slide. But one thing that we found really interesting is that the enhanced CPC, or the enhanced cost per click, which is 50% controlled by a human in the bids that we set and 50% controlled by machines, it has a 7% increase in conversions with a comparable cost per acquisition. Max conversions, when we say, Google, I want you to spend my budget, yet deliver me as many conversions as possible, 20% more with a similar cost per acquisition. Target cost per acquisition, or TCPA, 31% increase with comparable CPA, and target ROAS, 35% improvement in ROAS. So bidding is really about giving Google or Bing a goal and getting back what you ask for. So when we're thinking about machine learning, what we're really thinking about is a benefit-free employee. Yes, there's a salary to pay, quote unquote, because you have to pay for the data for it to get ramped up, but it's ultimately a far more cost-effective way to get that work done. So when we're talking about that work, it really is about deciding when to delegate versus own our tasks. And before I dive into this section, I'm going to kind of lay out the framework. I consider the tasks that we humans perform either data acquisition or learning how our people search, what they cost, optimization, creating better results with our existing data, and scale, investing in net new ideas, scaling projects, things like that. So that's the framework of how we're going to look at these. If you have questions about that, or if you'd like to go into it a little bit more depth, happy to address them during the Q&A. So data acquisition with help from machines begins with keyword research. Should you own it? Should you share it? Should you delegate it? And with owning it, that likely means you have a limited budget, but you've worked in the industry before. You also have the time to fully prove out your campaign. You won't have a client or a boss nipping at your heels saying, where are my leads? Where is my volume? What's going on? Now, when we're thinking about those new match types, and I referenced it a little bit before with close variants, exact no longer is perfectly exact. So when we're thinking, for example, about speeding ticket attorney, it actually matches by the rules of exact to lawyer traffic tickets, which means that you don't necessarily need to bid on both lawyer and attorney. You could invest in a keyword concept that is truly going to serve you and your business. But we do want to make sure that we're checking our keyword assumptions at the local level. For example, DUI attorney crushes it in Mississippi and Arkansas in terms of volume, in terms of how people search, how people think, how people respond to creative. Yet in Texas, particularly because you now have, let's say, DWIs versus DUI, lawyer reigns supreme. So we really do want to leverage those Google trends to check those keyword concepts and what will work in which audience. I mentioned before, if a learning periods take 2 weeks at the minimum. The smaller your budget, the longer the learning period. So if you do own keyword research, be prepared for that full ramp up. Now, when sharing, if you need you do need volume, but you can temper it with human experience. You have the budget for data, but you still want to keep a little bit of control. And this may also be a new industry for you. Now, my absolute favorite way to do this is something called dynamic search ads, or DSA. DSA is going to have Google crawl your site and identify the best landing page for the query based off of the target that you set. To opt into this, it should be a campaign level choice. It should absolutely not be an ad group in an existing campaign, and I'll go into that in a second. But you're going to pick that setting at the campaign level. Once you make a campaign DSA, it cannot be unmade DSA. So be very careful and specific about setting that DSA campaign. If you choose to do DSA or dynamic search ads, you must set every single keyword that you are actively targeting as an exact match negative in that DSA campaign, because by the nature of how it performs, the DSA is liable to steal traffic, steal budget, steal credit from those existing keyword concepts. So DSA is very good about teaching you how your prospects search and what they cost. It also is very good at potentially taking traffic away from existing ideas. Now, when we're thinking about DSA, it performs a very similar function to broad match. So only one word has to be there and it could be a synonym. You do not want to run both DSA and broad. And the reason for that is that because they perform the same job, they are the most likely to basically compete with each other. And so what we can actually see here is that in this case where we have a DSA campaign and a broad match oriented campaign where it's a single word as broad match, they're actually both losing a substantial amount of impression share due to rank. They are competing with each other and limiting each other's efficiency. So again, if you're going to do DSA, you likely don't need broad. If you're going to do broad, depending on your industry, you may not need DSA, but it is, again, your choice. So in deciding whether DSA is for you, DSA does best in industries with lots of landing pages. So think auto, think real estate, think travel, think national brands that have a local presence. So again, with DSA, you will be able to craft the descriptions, not the headlines. So as you're picking your targets, I definitely do encourage you to preview the types of creative Google would create off of the target that you're going to choose to make sure that it will actually meet the brief you intend to set. Now, if you're going to delegate, you likely have a large budget and no experience in the industry. And as a word of caution, if you fully delegate now in this keyword research phase, you are creating a ton of work for yourself in the optimization phase with negatives. It is also incredibly important to note that if you do this, you should only let this phase last 1 to 2 months. It should absolutely not last longer than that because otherwise you're just creating waste. The whole point of doing a full delegation is because you're basically buying the data from Google or Bing and saying, I want to learn how my people search, teach me so that I can make intelligent decisions later. Now, if you go this through, there's effectively one of 3 things that you'll be doing. You'll either be running a smart campaign, smart search, smart shopping, smart display. You'll do that small broad ad group, so a single broad keyword with everything else as a negative in that ad group, or you'll be doing pure DSA. Now, if you do smart campaigns, it's important to note once a campaign is smart, it can't be undone. It's kind of like the Cybermen for any Doctor Who fans out there. So be very, very sure that you are ready for the campaign to be a smart campaign and know what you want out of it. Now, my 2 favorite smart campaigns are shopping and display. Smart shopping has unbelievable value to bring profit. It does require a substantial amount of data though, which I'll go into in a second. Smart display, I am in love with for the fact that you can actually say, hey, give me leads at this price. But it is important to note that with Smart Display, you have limited control in terms of where your ads serve. So you just your brand has to be able to tolerate that. Now, as I mentioned, Smart Shopping requires a substantial amount of investment. Smart Shopping, amazing ROAS. It's non-negotiable that the Smart Shopping absolutely crushed life with 961% ROAS, but it also required almost $13,000 of spend, whereas the regular shopping campaign was able to be about flat, not necessarily off the charts ROAS, but it was under $1,000 of spend. So depending on where you are in terms of budget, you may or may not be able to opt into Smart at this time, but it is definitely something to shoot for if you are in e-commerce. Now with Smart Search, it is very risky. It is unequivocally risky because you're not going to be able to have the power of negatives to protect your brand. So be very, very sure that you are okay giving up the human component for control. It can be really useful to teach you, but again, you only want it to run for a limited amount of time. Now, this happens to be my favorite way of running data acquisition, say for DSA. And again, it depends on industry. So if you don't necessarily have a ton of landing pages, small broad can be great. And it'll mean 2 to 3 ad groups with 1 to 2 broad match terms, where again, everything else is a negative in that ad group. And the power of that is that broad match is, ironically enough, exact match and phrase match have gotten broader. Broad match has actually gotten more specific because there's that much more data fueling how Google looks at broad match. So, and this happens to be a screenshot of the WordStream interface. You can actually see those queries right from the manage section. But we can see aggressive dog training leading to why does my dog get aggressive when someone leaves? That's an amazingly useful query, not necessarily something you want to actively target because it's very, very long till maybe the search volume isn't there, but that broad match could give it to you. Now with DSA, it is so incredibly important, unbelievably important that you're building in assessing your search terms, or if you're a WordStream customer, the query stream, in your weekly review. Because DSA's whole point is to teach you how your people search and potentially revisit ideas that you may have gotten rid of, which we're going to return to the slide in a minute. I want you guys to actually think about, I'm going to leave it up here for a second, what idea I might be talking about that we'd revisit, and we'll get to a little bit later in the webinar. So with which keyword research path should we take? If you're going to own it, you know what keywords to go after, and you know what they should cost. You have a good idea of the search subtleties in different regions, and you're tight on budget and need the control. If you're going to be sharing with the machines, you should likely, or you have the budget to learn how your prospects search, but you want to control the scope, particularly if you're a little bit still budget conscious. You also may have worked in the industry before, but you don't have the time for the full ramp-up period. This is particularly true for agencies who have clients that are aggressive for volume now and maybe don't quite understand exactly what they need. So this is kind of a good way to meet their what they feel they want, but also still deliver value. Delegation means money is no object, and it is so important that that is true if you're going to go this route, because you are under pressure to get volume right now. If you're delegating, you also have the buy-in from sales and leadership in yourself to invest heavy now so your decisions are data backed later. Now with bidding, owning share and delegation is really a devil's bargain, because when you own your bids, you are sacrificing the 60+ unique signals that the ad networks leverage when you opt into their automations. There is no right or wrong answer here. Everyone can have different answers and different values that they are striving for, but it is important to know how to switch when you're looking at your bids and budgets. So in the current Google Ads interface, it actually is very hard to opt into manual. It's actually under that green line or select a bid strategy directly, not recommended. If you're going to be doing manual, that's where you're going to be going. I do recommend that you explore the different bidding strategies, but I also recommend that you're very conscious of what levers you've pulled if you started manual. Because if you did start on manual and you switch to automation, you may actually jack up your target CPA. You may adjust the priority by switching to an automated bidding strategy. Vice versa, you may have delegated managing the devices, the audiences, all of these levers that you normally would have under manual, and you may not yet know to go for it. So this is a great cheat sheet our friends over at Optimizer put together. Highly recommend that you kind of take a look at it. Any of us here at WordStream would be happy to tweet it out to you. But this is actually one of the most important things to keep in mind when you're going between automated versus manual is what levels of control you're gaining or losing. Now, if you do ask Google to deliver you volume, you cannot hold it accountable for value. So what we actually did is we took a look at a base group of WordStream accounts, and we saw that when people were leveraging, say, ACPC or that enhanced cost per conversion, max conversions, TCPA, conversion rates were pretty high. In fact, ACPC had some of the highest conversion rates. Yet when we actually looked at the metric that I would argue matters a little bit more, ROAS or return on ad spend, ECPC, TCPA, and max conversions is all the way down there, really don't meet the mark, whereas TROAS 100% meets goal. Ironically enough, max clicks, and I would argue max clicks with a bid cap, did better than TCPA. So just be very careful when you ask Google, or to be fair, Bing as well, to deliver you value. Do not ask it to then also deliver volume and vice versa. Now, I happen to personally lean very heavily on the side of sharing and delegating with bidding. I used to be the most anti-automated bidding person you would meet, but I've kind of come around based off of the performance I've seen. However, and this is so important, if you do not trust your conversions, you are not allowed to use smart bidding, manual or automated only. One of the reasons that we at WordStream actually include implementation support conversion tracking as part of your subscription if you're a WordStream customer, regardless of what level you come on, is because we know it is so incredibly important. So if you don't trust your conversions, you have to do manual or automated only. You cannot use TCPA, TROAS, max conversions, and enhanced CPC. So if you're owning, you are committed to investing the time to micromanage bids. That's just going to be your life. But you are likely going to have conservative max cost per clicks, and then you'll leverage your devices to push budget towards or away from those useful prospects, location targeting and location bid adjustments, ad schedules, things like that. Now, if you share, you trust your conversions, but you may also have some budget for data acquisition. I do encourage you to leverage bid caps. Now, the reason why I love sharing and delegating is because I love teaching folks what budget they need to get the most value out of their marketing, not only spend, but time. And the most valuable metric to help guide you on whether you have the right bidding strategy, the right budget, the right keywords is impression share. So what's actually really fascinating here is that even though we can't see our average positioning anymore, we can still see where are we potentially losing impression share and how often are we serving at the top versus the absolute top. And in this instance, there's only one campaign, it happens to be branded, that has that 98.35. Everyone else is falling short of that average 50% impression share. So if you're seeing that your impression share is below 50%, that likely is a sign that either you've asked your budget to do too much, you have the wrong bidding strategy in place for your goals, or the keyword concepts that you're going after just do not fit the budget. Now, if you're going to delegate, all bidding strategies are fair game, and you're not going to use bid caps. And you only are going to do this if you know beyond a shadow of a doubt you have the budget for the learning period. And I cannot overstate this enough. If you do not have budget, you have to go the share route. If, however, you know you have budget and it's, again, a month or 2 months, this is an absolutely fair way to go. So breaking this down, owning, sharing, and delegation, if you're going to own it, you have the time to micromanage the bids, and that means living in your account micromanaging. You also may not trust your conversion tracking, and you know this industry and can set bids in line with your goals. If you're sharing, you either trust your conversions or you're okay using bid caps. You also might be unsure what auction price will get you the quality leads, but you can't quite commit to machine-owned bids because they're expensive. And you'll notice a little bit of deja vu here with delegation. Money is no object. That is almost always going to be the case if you fully delegate in the data acquisition phase. You need volume. But you also like I mentioned earlier, you may want to teach your team what goals are realistic versus unrealistic and get their buy-in for a test. So we've spent a lot of time on keywords and bids. We're now going to talk about creative. If you have any questions about any of the sections so far, absolutely put them into the chat. I can see those questions being marked down. Keep giving us those questions. Now, I will throw it out there that ad networks have been watching us work for quite some time, and they get it. Not everyone is going to be a brilliant copywriter, and that's actually why Google and also Bing will as well, as will Facebook, actually create ads for you. So there's a lot of fear associated with these ads, but Google actually found that 70% of advertisers don't enjoy the activity of ad creation. So they have this ability to just create the ad for you. Google will also make extensions. I would argue you should make any extension that you're going to pay for. Think site links, think call extensions, message extensions, but ultimately you can delegate some of those extensions as well. Now, to prove the point about how Google is not necessarily out to get you, I want to show you guys some ads. I can promise you at least one of these was made by an AI. So I'm going to leave them up for a second, and I want you to kind of mentally think about it. Which ad was made by a human and which ad was made by AI? So I'm going to give you guys like a little bit, and boom. 2 out of those 3 were actually AI ads. And what I found really fascinating about these ads is that the 2 AI-oriented ads got the majority of the impressions. And one of them, the top performing AI ad, actually outperformed the human-created one on ROAS, on CPA, on click-through rate. Like it absolutely outperformed. Yet if you compare the human-created ad to the runner-up AI ad, the human-created ad got less impressions, but actually outperformed the runner-up. So the moral of the story is that Google can make average ads. So if you're going to make average ads, don't worry about that task. Be empowered to delegate it. Now, Facebook is in kind of a similar spot where they can make, again, average ads, average campaigns of those automated ad campaigns. In testing it, we found that, are they perfect? No, but with 6% conversion rates off of an ad set that took, 15 minutes to create, that's pretty darn impressive. And what we also found is that the dynamic ad actually had 188% better conversion rate than the non-dynamic. So if you're going to own creative, please, I beg you all, create ads that will speak to your buyer personas. Create ads that will have engaging creative, and actually invest the time to match your audiences. One of the nice things about, say, in-market audiences, custom affinity audiences, is that you can actually not only ground your creative in the keywords and the search terms, but you can also pre-qualify traffic that they actually are in market for what you do. So whether that's in customizers, whether that's just in bidding folks up, excluding folks, there's a lot of power in audiences. Now, if you're going to share, you have ideas, but you can't own the process. So think responsive search ads, customizers, dynamic search ads. It's basically human-guided machine creation. And we're going to talk about responsive in depth now. And I want to define responsive real quick because I feel like it's gotten so much flack. Responsive, by definition, means reacting quickly and positively. And the beauty of responsive is that it actually empowers the analytical types to be creative. So if you look at how responsive display functions, it actually guides you along that path. WordStream has similar tools in our 20-minute work week, in our Facebook ad creation, with our smart ad display. But 100% you can create beautiful creative simply by taking lines that you know work. Now, with responsive search ads, these are, as I mentioned at the beginning, messaging matchmakers. And where these go awry is that people don't pin headline 1 or 2, which are the guaranteed headlines to serve, and they don't lock in the idea that's the most important. The other thing, and this is actually something our Director of Strategic Partnerships, Mark Irvin, mentioned in one of his talks, is that RSAs are really meant for the creative out-of-the-box ideas. So when you're thinking about responsive search ads, we get it that you can't see the full ad and that this intel might be kind of a waste and Boba Fett going into the Sarlacc pit, but Google actually owns that you should have those two ETAs playing bodyguard on messaging. So those responsive search ads are not meant to be your proven entities. They are meant to be accompanied by two well-crafted, data-oriented, expanded text ads that play bodyguard. Now, if you delegate, you're no copyright, and you are going to allow the auto-created ads and DSA. So let's actually dive into DSA in a little bit more depth, because like this is arguably one of my favorite automation forms. So there are 3 ads here. Can you spot the DSA ad? I'll give you guys like a second or two just to look them over and kind of think about where might the ad serve. And if you guess that first ad, you are 100% correct. And what I found really fascinating about this is that DSA ads 100% have better click-through rate, but their conversion rate is entirely dependent on whether you set exclusions and negatives in place. So DSA by nature is designed to put traffic on well SEO'd pages because by how traffic finds landing pages off of DSA is that you target a part of your site. So you want to make sure in setting up your DSA campaign, you're setting your home page as an exclusion, your about us, your contact, anything that is content rich that could have that SEO equity that could maybe not convert as well as the particular landing page you're looking for. So on creative, if you're going to own your creative, you love writing ads. Like you genuinely enjoy it. You've set yourself up to easily test for variables, so you're not going to necessarily run different landing pages, different ads. Like you know how to create your tests. And your brand requires you to run creative by others. Like you're not allowed to have any creative launched unless everyone, legal, client, whatever, has signed off. If you share, you don't necessarily love writing ads, but you aren't required to control the core messaging. So it's okay if it's a little bit different. Maybe it's not off message, not off brand, but it's the brand maybe didn't see until it was out in the wild. And you're unsure which messaging will land, and you don't necessarily have time to manage tests. That's where responsive search ads, responsive display ads come in, and the Facebook automated ads. If you delegate, you are the analytical numbers person, and this is just not your thing, and you don't have the time to be creative, you don't have the resources, delegate away. That's why the ad networks created that solution. But you also have to understand that if you go that route, you're not under strict guidelines, and the creative is going to be the creative, and it's going to be the creative. We've just spent a bunch of time talking about owning, sharing, and delegating. You're going to notice that in the optimization phase, machines are going to factor far less into this. This is where we, with our business acumen, our human strategic minds, begin to take far more control. And quality control begins with SERP analysis and actually assessing not only is this a transactional page with a full 4-pack, but also do I like the competitors that I am serving with? Do these represent the right people for me to compete with? Now, I mentioned earlier that we would come back to the DSA search terms report. And what I found really fascinating about this is I, as a knee-jerk reaction, almost always write off customer service. That is almost always a negative. It's like in my negative list when I pre-build campaigns. And what I found in this one campaign that it happened to slip through is that customer service from my competitors came in as significantly cheaper conversions. So the power of DSA is not just that it's going to get you to teach how your prospects search, it'll also help you check your assumptions. So I definitely encourage you, let DSA be free in at least its first month or two so that you can get those checks. As I mentioned earlier, depending on how much you delegated, you will either have a super intensive or incremental gains optimization phase. Exact match, acting like broad, has to factor into it. So when you're thinking about close variants and what keyword concepts you go after, I mentioned it earlier, it's worth mentioning again, really be thoughtful about not just which keyword concepts are going to get to stay, but also what auction price for what variant makes the most sense. What I found really fascinating is that when we looked, again, at that same cohort we looked at before with the automated bidding, is that when we look at variants or the exact match or it matched by exact, but the keyword itself was on phrase, it was actually 33% cheaper across both desktop and mobile than bidding on true exact. So if you're concerned about, I need to have that exact match term, I need to have this exactly, remember that bidding on phrase will still give you access to exact. So if you owned your data acquisition, you're going to be auditing your variants and have some negative work. WordStream's query stream actually provides a far cleaner, more filtered view. Happy to talk through that during the Q&A. But I want to make sure that you guys see what the columns you would be pulling in on the native platform. If you delegated, be prepared for hours, and I mean hours of negative work. So if you know in the beginning you can delegate, just be prepared in the optimization phase, you're going to be spending more time. If you spend a bunch of time in the beginning, you'll spend a little bit less time in the optimization. So with workflow, is my time being invested correctly? And sorry, auto-driving cars, I actually don't have a license, so I'm waiting for the days when auto-driving cars are a thing, but like for now, there is no such thing as a set it and forget it auto-driving campaign or car. But it is important to note that if you make too many changes in a short period, it will hurt you. So when we're thinking about owning, sharing, and delegating workflow, it's actually a little bit less of marketing mechanics and far more about personal workflow and like work-life balance. So if you own, you're mindful of not just when you're creative or analytical, but also what tasks you enjoy and when you would want to delegate. So for example, I am a morning person. I actually wake up early so that I can have from 6 until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon for creative and analytical tasks. There are other people that could not even begin to do any content work or analytic stuff that early. They have to work at night. So do you have 5 unmovable minutes for your creative tasks, your analytical tasks, when you are the most aligned to do that? So if you own, you have those 5 unmovable minutes scheduled. If you share, you are likely going to be using native recommendation engines or third-party tools. The 20-minute work week is getting a shout out here, but it is important to note also, before you accept a suggestion, consider if it will actually help your business. It is also important to note that ad testing solutions like responsive search ads, responsive display ads will play a big role. On the Facebook side, it is really important to note that Facebook made the intelligent choice of transitioning from ad set level budgets to campaign level budgets. And what that actually did is it made it so that when you set the campaign objective and the style of the campaign, it's going to actually perform and send ads through in different ways. So you now can actually align, just like you would do on the search side, the display side, the video side, campaign budgets with objectives. You now can do that as well on the Facebook side. Now with delegation, AI-oriented tools are pretty much what you'd be using. I am not going to rat out any fellow tools in the space. What I will say is that account structures that AI machines take over, or that you take over from an AI machine, are not fun to take over. We actually here at WordStream help a lot of folks rehabilitate campaigns that have gone through that. But the reason why you would be delegating is because your time is more valuable than the money you would invest in that tool. So what you have to ask yourself is, will you spend more if you manage it yourself? Now with owning, sharing, and delegation, if you own it, you know yourself, you can be disciplined in how you allocate your time. And you've also set yourself up with an account structure that you can easily navigate and report on. Like you've set yourself up for success. In sharing, you need help knowing where to work, but you can't get it done yourself. But you can get it done yourself, and you also have enough knowledge to audit machine-driven suggestions, whether that's the native platforms, whether that's the 20-minute work week, what have you. And in delegation, you honestly can't be bothered with active management, but you also may not be able to afford an agency or an in-house resource. So final takeaways. Man versus machine is dead. Long live man X machine or man times machine. We're going to invest our mental energy on tasks that spark joy. We're going to test out partially and fully automated campaigns because you still own creative. Automated bidding can score big wins. Be sure that you ask for what you want. Honor what you will be held accountable for and build campaigns that meet those briefs. And dynamic search ads can be a really powerful keyword research tool. Invest in known entities. and ad networks can write average ads. You should only be investing your time on creative if you're going to actually spend the time to write good creative. And with that, I'm very excited to share all these things with you and take your questions after a brief check-in from the team.
Thanks, Nava. That was awesome. That was tons of information. Before we get to questions, if you're interested in speaking with one of our PPC experts here at WordStream about your account, please take us up on this offer that's on your screen now. You take us up on the offer by hitting yes, and this call is completely free, and one of our experts will do an individualized account analysis. If you're interested, definitely click on the offer here on your screen. I will leave that up as Nava answers some questions. So while you guys take a look at that, we will jump into some questions. So Nava, in the beginning, you mentioned that smart campaigns cannot be undone, so you'll definitely want to be sure that it's correct. So a couple of people out there were wondering, how can I be absolutely sure? Do you have sort of like a checklist you can go over in your head? And sort of in addition to that, if a smart search is so risky, do you ever recommend it?
Both are great questions. The old smart search, I'm actually going to address the second one first. The old smart search was Google Ads Express. When it was Google Ads Express, I never would recommend it. You would never, ever hear me say, go do it. In today's world where time is just as valuable as money, depending on who you are, you may find that you truly do not have the time and you just need leads to come in and you don't necessarily have the time to even check the reports. One of the nice things, and this is a little bit shameless pluggy, WordStream's value is the ability to actually take the time that you would have had to spend in managing, reporting, reviewing, and make it simple. So it kind of is like a smart search while still making sure that you have the control and ownership. So it's just, that's worth noting. I prefer the control. Now, in regards to knowing when to do smart means that you have budget. So the smaller your budget, the longer it will take to get ramped up. So if you are under pressure to get performance right now, it is non-negotiable, but you also have a tiny budget, smart is never going to be for you, just because of the nature of the amount of data that it needs in order to perform well. If, however, you either have the time for it to ramp up, if you have a smaller budget, or you have full-on budget and you're ready to invest, smart is kind of what we strive for, because it's the means to get leads without having to actively go in every single day.
Awesome, thank you. So we had another question coming in. When you're talking about switching from automated bidding to manual or vice versa to see what's kind of best for us, how long do you typically recommend that we would try that out? How long is long enough to know if it fails or if it's successful?
So that 2 weeks, and I try to mention as many times as possible because I want that to kind of be put into everyone's subconscious, is the learning period for native platforms. I used to compare it to skin cycles. Skin cycles are 2 weeks. Google runs in 2 weeks. Bing runs in 2 weeks. Facebook seems like it has a little bit of a shorter time period. What I will say is that I give any initiative I'm looking to test at least 1 week. And if it tanks, I'll abort the test. But short of it tanking, I like to give anything I'm going to run 2 weeks. If I have a larger budget, 2 weeks is probably fine. If I have a smaller budget, I'll try to give it actually closer to 4 to 6 weeks. But again, it really depends on what the initiative is. So a really good example, if I'm switching from manual bidding to, say, max clicks with a bid cap or max conversions, I would give that the 2 weeks. If, however, I'm switching from max clicks with a bid cap to manual or TCPA to manual, I would give myself a month, because I'd want to see how am I enjoying micromanaging and am I getting better results off of that. So depending on what you're doing, what you're switching, you'll want to give yourself different amounts of time. I highly, highly, highly encourage you, and we'll tweet it out, we'll share it with everyone, have that checklist of what you lose when you switch to automated bidding. The most common culprit I see in WordStream accounts, when we're helping to rehabilitate them when they're coming on as customers, is that they'll have TCPA or target CPA on, because that's a very popular bidding strategy now, that our partners at Google are encouraging folks to try. But people won't have changed the device bid adjustment. So they'll have a plus 50% bid adjustment for mobile because you have to bid aggressively for mobile. But then what they've effectively told Google is they're willing to pay 50% more for leads on mobile. So you just want to be very, very careful about what levers you've pulled, and how long you give different tests.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so we just had a great question come in. Somebody asked, how does changing your daily ad spend affect your campaign success? So for instance, if I were to start with a high dollar amount and slowly lower the spend versus if I were to keep it consistent throughout, how is that going to affect my campaign success?
So unfortunately, when you have a bidding strategy on, any budget change, any change to the CPA goal, any change to the ROAS goal, is actually going to reset your learning period. So if you are making all of those changes and you're fluctuating the spend, you are resetting the clock and basically keeping yourself in quote unquote new campaign land. So you're effectively dealing with a toddler campaign as opposed to a grown, mature, successful adult campaign. If you have to live in that land, because either the nature of your business is constantly fluctuating, you kind of have to be on manual. What I will say is that there usually is a far better business case for pulling your budget, say, down to $1 than turning it off in terms of learning period, or potentially adding an ad schedule. What I also will say is that if it comes to seasonality, like you're pulling your budget down either because you're over capacity on leads or you're getting ready for a new season, you want to give yourself a month lead time to adjust budgets. So say, for example, and this is actually a client of mine, she knows that she's really busy right now, but she's going to be in about 2 months super, super busy. The budget came down a week ago, and we're going to put the budget up in about 4.5 weeks, simply because we want to give ourselves enough time for it to get ramped back up. So any budget change has the 2-week ramp up period. I realize this was a longer answer to the initial question, but it's really important that you keep that in mind as you're deciding what levers to pull.
Perfect. Okay, so we had a couple questions coming in. You mentioned a lot about trusting your conversions. So we had a couple questions coming in. For instance, does this mean trusting our abilities to track within our ERPs, or just sort of like asking you a little bit more to elaborate on exactly how, like what that trust would mean to you?
Sure. So trusting conversions simply means that the conversions that you are telling Google or Bing or Facebook to track are accurate. Now, what that means in terms of mechanics, your conversions are tracking if you can have multiple conversion actions, either a sale, someone completing multiple actions, and it truly is valuable equally, that they all happen. You're tracking every conversion. In most cases, though, you likely want to track only the unique conversion. You also want to be careful about how many, say, Google Analytics goals you've pushed into Google Ads, or to be fair, into any native platform for conversion actions. One of the nice things about working within WordStream is that we actually have our easy tracking that will just be that trust. It's a Google Tag Manager. It's the Google code, your Facebook code, your Bing code, your remarketing, all that. But all that really matters is that the conversions themselves, you trust. So if you're seeing, say, for example, 8 conversions off of a single click, you likely should not trust your conversions. If you see 2 conversions off of a single click, you may still trust your conversions, but you want to check. This other piece to this is attribution modeling. So if you're on last click, there's almost no reason to track every conversion. Usually you'd want to be on, and this is like a whole other webinar and whole other resources, and we'll send them to you. I'm not going to take up like our whole Q&A on attributions, but I do want to put the plug out there. If you can, you should be on something like position-based, database, time decay, so that you can get that full picture and give full credit to any of your display initiatives, your video initiatives, search initiatives, so on and so forth.
Great, thanks, Nava. So I think we have about a little bit of time for about one more question. So this is kind of a higher level question, but in general, can you speak a little bit to PPC versus SEO? We had somebody write in saying, I'm trying to decide if my budget should go to PPC or SEO. Ideally, it would go to both, but what do you recommend if somebody doesn't have a budget for both?
So what I find really fascinating about the folks that are deciding where to put their budget for SEO versus paid is that SEO is actually a lot more expensive than most people think it is to do truly technical SEO. What to think about with SEO versus PPC is that PPC, whether it's Google, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Bing, whether it's YouTube, whether it's any paid medium, it's their job is to drive you leads and sales. SEO's job is to help you be found when people are looking for an answer that you could be relevant to. And while those may seem fairly similar depending on your sales cycle, while those may seem kind of adjacent, there is a distinction there of buying transactional intent versus research intent. One of the reasons why I happen to love dynamic search ads or DSA is your ability to capitalize and basically press an easy button off of organic efforts. The strongest DSA campaigns actually come off of sites that are well run organically. So when it comes to organic versus paid, it's not that you do one versus the other, it's what does your business need right now. If you are looking to make up for organic gains, paid is not what you run. You run paid because you want leads and sales in business. Organic is more, you just want to be found on Google.
Awesome. Thank you, Nava. That was so much great information. We still have lots of questions coming through, but I think this is probably a great place to stop. If you submitted a question and it wasn't answered, we will definitely be sending those questions off to all of our experts here who will get back to you with some answers. And again, please don't forget to sign up right now to chat with an expert about your account, and we hope to see you all again during November's webinar.